Hello, friends. Believe it or not, it's episode 46 of Hack Your Thoughts. I can't believe how time has flown. We're still on our series, The Hidden Ways We Shrink Ourselves, and I know many of you out there are really enjoying this conversation. Today, we'll be talking about how do we move from shrinking to take your space. And today's episode is called Stop the Shrink, Start Expanding. Imagine walking into a room, not shrinking, not hesitating, not questioning if you belong. Imagine fully stepping into your space, your voice, your presence without apology, because this isn't about taking from others. It's about finally allowing yourself to be as big as you were meant to be. Not giving yourself permission. You don't need to give yourself permission. You allow yourself to just do it. So, why does this matter? Many of us spend years shrinking, sometimes without realizing it. But shrinking isn't humility. The antidote to shrinking isn't aggression, it's expansion. It's expansion. It's deciding to step into your full self without needing permission, just allowing yourself. This isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's about being the most fully you in the room. So here are some questions, to ponder before we dive in. What would happen if you stopped holding back? Think about that. What's one area where you've been quiet for so long? What is that one area? Today's hack is stop the shrink, start expanding. Choose one way to take up more space today. Find that one place where you can take up more space. Speak up. Sit at the table instead of at the edge of the table. Stop apologizing for existing. Shrinking doesn't serve us, and it's certainly not serving the world. So let's talk about how we shift from shrinking to expanding and what it really means to reclaim your space. So again, we have in the studio two exciting, incredible voices and two individuals and humans that I love and respect so much. Kevin Johnson KJ and Steve Tulowitzki. This and after this break, we're going to dive right into that conversation. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Hack Your Thoughts. As promised, KJ and Steve are here with me, and I'm so thrilled to have their voices in this conversation about expansion and presence. So let's begin by having each one of you introduce yourself. I know you did that last week, but let's go ahead and introduce yourselves again, just in case there's somebody new that's listening in. So, Steve, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I will go ahead. I was gonna shrink away, but I'll go for it, full throated. I'm Steve Tulowitzki. I am a wonderful father. I thought of that in preparation for this because Chloe, you told me that once. I was having a tough time. I was doubting myself, and you just said, "Steve, you're a wonderful father." And I kind of shrinked away, and you probably said it 3 or 4 times straight to me. My girls, Zoe and Lana, are the most important thing in my world. For them, I became a coach, a leadership coach. For them, I want to keep getting better at all of this stuff every day because through our children is how we make the world a different place.
Mm.
And yeah, so that's me. I am a leadership coach and lucky to be friends with you and KJ.
I love that because family and the ones that are dear to us is where we can be our most real self, where we should be our most real self.
Mhm.
And I feel that way with Jethro, even though sometimes I want to pull my hair, but he helped me to show up in my real full self.
Mhm.
Um, KJ.
Yeah, thanks for that opening, Steve. I was thinking about that earlier myself. The first folks I ever coached in my life were my children,
Mm.
and Andrea, Kevin, and Alyssa. To this day, we talk pretty frequently, especially recently. Now we have a daily check-in around, accomplishments, like what have you done today? What have you
Mm.
accomplished today? Which makes my heart really really full, to be able to know that we can connect and talk about things that are important to us. Sometimes it's just, what have you done today? Oh, I worked out today. That's it. That's my accomplishment. Great. Did you stay in bed and sleep late? Yes, that's even an accomplishment nowadays. Having good rest. Rest is
Well,
rebellion. Having a rested heart is rebellion nowadays, and it's resistance. So, I've been doing this coaching thing for 26 years now, and love the work that I do. I live in Costa Rica, and I do work around the world, remotely and in person. So, that's my introduction.
Wow. I mean, just to start our time today, just full of love for our
Mm.
children is just amazing. Yeah. Um, Same thing with Jethro. So, you're a wonderful father. You're a wonderful father. And I'm a wonderful mom.
you're a wonderful
Yes,
mom.
you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Oh
am.
yeah. I have witnessed it.
Yeah. And there are times when I want to coach Jethro, I coach him. And when he's not in the mood, he says, "Okay, mom, you coaching me?" Ah, okay, right, exactly. So KJ, it's like KJ's waiting for you. KJ, can you please coach Jethro? Can you just help him there?
Right.
Oh, can you do that for me? You've been there. Oh my God. And you know what? He's so appreciative of your coaching,
Mm.
which, and we never talk about it. I don't
Hmm.
ask him. I
Hmm.
just let him be. Okay, so great
Mm.
way to dive into the conversation about how we don't shrink for our children.
Mm.
That's what we
Yeah.
don't do.
Hmm.
We show up for them in our full whole self. We give everything.
Can
How do
I
we?
can I can I riff off of that?
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, like some of what we're going to talk about. When did I stop shrinking? When did I notice I was shrinking? Zoe was born in 2011, and my whole life changed. And I think prior to that, I shrank at every place that I could in order to what I would now call manipulate people into thinking that I was awesome at whatever I thought they needed me to be awesome at. And it really did put me in a really small place. I didn't know who I was or what I was doing. And she was born, and there was something in me that knew that that wasn't the real me. And it took me a whole year. It took me an acute mental health crisis. It took me to community, to reading, to learning, yeah, to admitting that I wasn't A plus all around 100%, this amazing person. In fact, I had let my ego, which I named later Stego, because he was making a mess of things, I let him shrink me, but not when Zoe was there. Like it took me a while to figure it out, but my whole life has changed since she was there.
Mm, yeah.
So for, as Nancy Pelosi might say, it's for the children.
Um,
Mm. Mm.
yeah.
It's for the
I love
children. That's
that.
why we do it.
I love it. Ah, now I'm thinking about my son. So let's go from a place of wholeness because we never shrink for them. We want
Mm.
to be there and show up without everything. Um, so when we're thinking about the shift from shrinking to expanding, so shrinking to expanding, what does expansion actually look like for someone who's been so conditioned to shrink their whole life?
Well, you said it at the beginning, that expansion is not necessarily loud, and I think about the metaphor of a balloon. When you open up a balloon, you get a fresh balloon, right? It's really tight, and you almost have to kind of stretch it out a little bit before you try to blow it up. And when you blow into it, it barely makes a move. You have to actually put a great deal of effort to get that balloon to start
I love that.
right. And so it's sometimes it's just that first
Oh,
breath, that first breath of insight, that first breath of I am here. I belong here. And sometimes no one else hears that, but you hear it. And when you start to tell yourself, I belong here, you start to fill in yourself and you start
Oh,
to expand. That's how I think about it in terms of the initial element, the initial experience of expansion. It doesn't have to be big. It just needs to happen in you.
oh my God, that's amazing. That is beautiful. Just that first breath, you give it all you get just to get started, because it's getting started that is the toughest part.
Mhm.
When the balloon is just like nothing, but just getting started. And once you start, you kind of create a rhythm.
Exactly. Every breath starts to expand it even more and more, and it's not as hard as the first breath. So
Exactly.
that
Wow.
first breath is critical, but it's not necessarily a loud experience. It's
Mm,
very personal. It's very quiet, right between you and yourself,
yeah.
effectively.
And all of a sudden, like 3 or 4 breaths in, you say, "What's going on over there?" Then everybody starts to notice, and there's a party coming. There's a reason this balloon is
Mhm.
there. What I also love about that metaphor, KJ, is that the balloons are manufactured all shrunk to be small, so you can pack them all in one little bag and
Wow.
ship them around. But that's not really what they're meant to be. That's not
Mhm.
the reason we have balloons. They're supposed to be expanded and let the party start.
Wow.
There's an inherent potential in the balloon.
Mm,
And when you apply that potential to itself, it
Mm,
expands. Right.
mm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's perfect.
Yeah.
wow. That's a lot of oxygen right there. Wow, that's a lot of oxygen. So let's keep this pumping.
Well,
Um,
okay, so I'll even play on that. Yes, that's good. That was good, Chloe. I heard what you
Mm,
did there. Think about it like this: it's also not about competition. So it's not about becoming bigger than another person's balloon.
mhm.
You are
mm,
your own. So you becoming as big as your soul always intended to be. So
Yes.
you have your own unique DNA. When you breathe into that, when you start saying I belong here and you stop shrinking and you start expanding, that belonging starts to take shape that only you can take shape of.
Mm, yeah.
And so as you blow into it, as you breathe life into it, you're going to discover something about the shape of yourself that maybe you didn't know before,
mm,
which
Mm,
should also be a little disconcerting. Could be some dissonance between what you thought you were versus who you are as you breathe into yourself. So
mhm.
be prepared for that dissonance. You may not recognize yourself. You may look at you like, wait, what's unfolding here? Is it a shaped balloon? Is it a heart shaped balloon? Is it a animal shaped balloon? Is it an arrow? Is it a I love you balloon?
Mm,
You think about all the different shapes you could take,
mm,
mm.
but when you start seeing it, don't get alarmed. Just take it in,
yeah.
because the more you breathe into yourself, the more identity you'll discover.
Yeah. So, and let me ask this question. So, trying to reconcile that, what I'm discovering, what I'm seeing emerge, what has been, what I know, what I'm comfortable, what I'm conditioned, instead of thinking about how do I reconcile that, are we saying just be in the new? Are we saying, how do we reconcile that?
I think there's something in seeing what's emerging and just allowing that to be what it is.
Mm,
Not putting labels on it, because we're quick to put labels on something.
yes. Yes.
Not trying to name it, not trying to categorize it. Just see who you are, see how you
Yes.
show up.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think it's really a spirit of play. A child playing with a balloon isn't trying to figure out, well, what's this balloon doing? Like it's like, oh my God, this thing is getting bigger. This is so cool.
Yeah.
And so just being in the awe of it, just being in the glory of it, the sheer expansion of it,
Yeah.
and not trying to name it, not trying to
Uh,
re-shrink it. It's
Mm,
effective, because effectively what we're doing, we categorize, is put something in a limiter,
mm, yeah.
and we don't want to limit the expansion. We want to keep that thing growing as big as we can get it, because that's the intention. Our soul wants to be the size that it can be. So
Yes.
Let's keep it
Boundless,
that way. Yeah.
boundlessness. Steve?
What I love about this is the idea of play and
Yeah.
fun. You know, what expansion is fun. It's like, oh, I didn't know that was possible. I didn't know I could do that. And that word possibilities came up for me when you're asking what does it look like to expand or sound like, or what is it like to expand? When you're shrunken and you're trying to be everything to everyone, uh, it's painful process, and pain makes the world small. It puts
Mm,
on blinders. All I can see is my pain. All I can see is what I'm not getting, how I don't fit in. And on the other hand, expansion just opens up possibilities.
yeah.
So I see what kind of balloon this is, and that can be used in this party, or I can fill it with helium and it can float for a while. I can make the game that kids play to keep it up, 25 taps in a row, something like that. There's all kinds of possibilities when you expand. That when you're just a flat piece of rubber with a hole in the end,
Mm,
there's not really much that you can do.
yeah. So, what's the cost of constantly playing small? And what finally wakes us up to it?
I know what came up for me.
Mm,
Uh, I, I wanted to say also, growth is fun. If you're in a company when it's growing, it's fun. You're in a startup, something is growing, it's fun. So the opposite of staying of expanding and staying small is not fun. It's not easy, and the opposite of ease somehow is dis-ease, which some people pronounce as disease.
okay.
And autoimmune diseases is when our T cells, when our blood cells, when our immune system looks at our own cells and thinks it's an intruder, and it
Mm,
starts to go after it. So I think I've experienced, and I believe the cost of staying small is that you start to confuse your whole neural system. You start to confuse your biology, and it starts to attack you, and you end up being sick and not having fun and expanding.
yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. Yeah. The word that comes to mind is we start to self destruct
Mm.
Mm. I
when
would
we
even
see.
take it further, maybe, to self betrayal,
Yes.
because there's an element of when you are aware of your potential, your possibilities, and you stay in a place where you are denying yourself access to those possibilities. That self betrayal, it's like you're forcing yourself to save yourself for unlived potential.
Mm,
It's like compound interest, but you're not living out that interest. So you just keep stacking and keep stacking and keep stacking all this potential inside of yourself while you're living out this very small existence.
yeah.
And it starts to build up to the point where I feel like this leads to mental health challenges.
That is
when
true.
we, when we know that we should be doing something bigger with our lives and we are staying in a compact space, that will drive us to a place of
Yes.
discomfort,
Oh my
emotionally,
gosh.
physically even.
Mhm.
So I think it's like when our soul starts to rebel against the mask that we're putting on, that's when we decide we're not going to shrink anymore.
Yeah.
KJ, I think you inspired I don't know if it's a new term, but it's a new term for me. When you're talking about this compound interest, it actually sounds like a spiritual debt.
Mm, mm.
Shrinking is like spiritual debt that just builds up, and it's so hard to get out of that.
I love that. Spiritual debt.
Yeah, Chloe, your book, your this whole podcast is about hacking your thoughts. It's about the operating system of human beings. So I had a couple thoughts here. One is that self-betrayal is like a virus in your operating system. It's
Yeah.
doing what it's
Yeah.
not supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
And so to expand again, you got to run some antivirus software.
Yeah. Yeah. It's malware.
Hmm.
It's malware. That's
Hmm.
right. It's
That's
Yep.
what it is, and that's why we have Cybersecurity. How do we protect our stuff?
And there is a term called technical debt, right? When you're coding a piece of software or a product, you take a shortcut here, you do something that's easy there, and that worked, and then you keep doing that over and over and through different iterations of what is you yourself. I took a shortcut, I made a little fib here, I pretended that I was excited about that there, and all of a sudden you've got all this technical debt, which makes your software, your product, much slower, much less effective and
Yeah.
clunky. You can still get by, but it's something that you really got to address, that technical debt or spiritual debt, maybe it is here, if you're going to expand.
Yeah. As we talking now, I'm just, what's coming to me is, how do we find our algorithm? What's our algorithm? What's that thing that works? What's our formula? How do we nail that? How do we get there? So those are thoughts that are like spinning in my mind right now. How do we get to that formula or that algorithm?
Well, that's really interesting. I was thinking about that earlier too, around what does that even look like, the algorithm? And so if we play around with this balloon metaphor, it could just be, what is the ultimate shape of our soul?
Yeah.
And when we're shrunk, we can't fully see it.
Mm.
When we fill it up, we can see it, and the algorithm is in the shape. The algorithm is constantly looking for itself, right? So when we like something on some of these social platforms, the algorithm gives us more of that.
Mm.
And in our own systems, in our own operating systems, the algorithm gives us more of who we are once we recognize it.
Yes.
But if we shrink, the algorithm will give us more of our shrinkingness, right? If that is a word.
Yeah.
Right. So the more we identify with who we are, the more the algorithm shifts to give us more of what we see in ourselves.
Mm.
And that's a self-reinforcing thing, which means when we have the self-betrayal, the algorithm gives us more of that. Thinks that's what we want.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So our
Yes.
intentions applied to this thing makes the algorithm work. And our intentions to shrink makes the algorithm give us more. And our intentions to expand makes that algorithm do the exact same thing.
Okay. So for everybody listening, what's on your feed?
Mhm.
What's on your feed right now? Because whatever that's coming up on your feed is how you're thinking, what you're looking at, how everything that you're drawn to.
Mm.
Your feed is who you are. Do you want that feed to be the way it is, or do you want to change that feed? So,
There's
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's another metaphor. It's actually from neuroscience, a part of your brain called the RAS, or reticular activating system. And the metaphor I love the most for it is that it's the bouncer for your brain. Right? There's a club, maybe there's rhythms inside, maybe Al Gore is playing music inside. That's the Al Gore rhythm. You want to get into that club. And there's a bouncer on the door, and the bouncer has a list, and he says only these things are allowed into the club, which is your brain, right? Which is your consciousness, your experience of life. And if you program, I want all these. I think it's important when I feel small. I think it's important that I get this promotion. I think it's important that everyone has a great opinion of me. These are the things that are important. That's what your bouncer starts looking for, and looking for evidence of either good things or bad things. So when you give the bouncer a good list, I want to expand. I want to see what's written on this balloon that I can only see when I blow it up. I want to have fun in my life. I want more clients. I want more great relationships. I want to be on episode 49 of the podcast. You put these things on the list, and then you start to see the opportunities out there as you get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, wonderful. Let's go to the next question. So, when we think about owning your space in daily life, what's one small everyday moment where you used to shrink and now you don't?
Oh,
I got
wow.
I got one I've been playing with. In fact, some of you might know I have a new hobby, a new habit. It's a well-being habit. It's totally fun, and it's called pickleball. We do that in the United States, especially up here in Michigan. And I just came from my first league event, and there was, 4 of us playing, and one guy was kind of shrinking. I could tell he was good, but he just hit one shot that wasn't good. And he said, "Oh," his name was Steve too. He's like, "Steven." And then he started saying, "I'm sorry," to his partner. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. So bad. I hit that." And that's kind of like a polite thing that we have been programmed to say. "I'm sorry. You show up late for a meeting? Sorry, I'm late." I always share this with my clients, but I decided to do it at home. I just had a conversation with Celine as well. It's like, there's no more sorry unless somebody did something on purpose to disrupt things. Otherwise, you're not sorry. Instead, we're going to say thank you.
Mm.
Right? "I'm sorry you had to take the kids to school." No, thank you for taking the kids to school. It does a lot of things to
Yeah.
reprogram, right? When I say I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm talking about feeling guilty. I'm bringing negative emotions, and I'm making it all about me.
Mm-hmm.
If I say thank you for your understanding, thank you for taking the kids, and what I did with my other Steve at pickleball, I said, if you feel like saying you're sorry, please say thank you. And if I hear you say you're sorry, I'm going to say you're welcome. And then, he was like, "Oh, thank you." And we ended up winning. Like, we won that match. We're winning at home by saying thank you instead of "I'm sorry." So that's one thing that actually, when I bet listeners and all of us, you start looking at how often you say you're sorry in a day, it's probably a lot more than you expect. So there's a hack.
Mm.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And as you said that, it feels simple, but the more we hear it, the
Mm.
more we will begin to say it. The more that actually becomes a thought that is so embedded in us that we just say, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And it's becomes a habit that we don't know we're doing.
And you could just as easily say thank you, thank
Yeah.
you, thank you. It is also a message to yourself and to your bouncer
Mhm.
that you are worthy of help and understanding from others. You
Mm.
deserve help and understanding from others, and that's what life is really about. So it's
Mm.
a small tweak, but it's a big shift.
That's
I
beautiful.
remember when we were at in Terranea, and one thing I will never forget is big doors swing on small hinges.
Mhm.
Mm.
I'll
Mm.
never forget.
Mhm.
KJ?
There's a little
Yeah.
hinge right there. That's a small hinge on that
Yeah.
door.
That was good, man. You hit it right on the nail.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think about a time when actually we were all working together,
Hmm.
and it was a new environment for me.
Hmm.
I'm, I'm kind of a free spirit, not necessarily wired for huge corporate spaces. And so it took me a minute to get my bearings on when I should insert myself in conversations. And sometimes I didn't feel the need to because someone else had already articulated the very thought that I would have contributed. And I'm not, you know, wired to be politically savvy and, just get my voice in there somehow anyway. So I found myself shrinking inadvertently. I didn't necessarily think I was shrinking, but because I wasn't presencing myself,
Mm.
it was perceived that I was shrinking.
Mm.
And so when I got that little nugget of feedback, my intention changed to I'm going to be the first one to share. I'm not going to wait to see what everyone else has to say. I'm going to presence my opinion, my point of view first. And when I started to do that, all of that feedback disappeared. And all of a sudden, people understood where I was coming from. And I didn't have that sense of my voice isn't in this space.
Mm.
And sometimes this is tricky because sometimes we have people that there are folks that just want to hear themselves talk, and they don't add anything to the conversation. I never felt that way about myself, but I always felt like, well, if someone has already said it, why would I? But I took that away from myself. I took that excuse away, and this is my hack, by
Hmm.
being the first one to say something.
Mm.
And now everyone else has to decide whether they have to say something in addition to what I've added. So I took that old excuse away from myself, but I also forced everyone else to have to bring their own point of view after me instead
Mhm.
of me waiting to see what other people said.
Mhm. What if somebody is listening to that story and they say to you, "KJ, um, I want to be the first person to share, but the words just don't come as quick as I wanted to."
Everyone doesn't have the gift of improv, and I know I do. So I know that if you gave me a word like spoon, I'd be like, you could dip with it, you could sip with it, you could do all kinds of cool things. You could scoop some things out of sugar cup with it. I can make up all kinds of ways you can come up with a use for a spoon. Not everyone can do that.
Mm,
So if that's not your gift, don't try to be the first one to speak. But if you have a point of view,
mm,
don't wait to the end.
yeah.
Be the second or the third. Some folks, especially introverted folks, they need a second and they need a beat
Mm,
to process something and articulate what they're thinking. So maybe you're the third or fourth, but don't sit until be the eighth, the ninth, tenth. Try to find your sweet spot where your voice fits naturally and you've given your time to think.
mm,
So that's all I would add to that.
yeah, yeah.
And,
Anything?
and yeah, let's not forget about allyship, right? If you're not the person who can say, "Oh, I'll bend the spoon with my mind," or what, if you can't riff off of the spoon, um, or maybe it's an environment where you say something and somebody talks over you, right? And you're not given the space. Find someone who can say, I was talking to KJ and he told me something really amazing about it. KJ, you comfortable sharing that right now?
Mhm.
Find someone else who maybe does have the gift of gab to make that space for you and ask for that help. You mentioned improv, and Chloe, for your question of what if the words just don't come out. What
Mhm.
they teach us in improv is just start saying anything, and eventually it'll start making sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
So
think
have
it's
some practice prompts. Practice some prompts.
yeah, you
Yeah.
just start saying words, and then they start to make sense all of a
And,
sudden.
and the principle of improv is yes and.
Hmm.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what someone has just said, agree with them. Let you give yourself a thinking time
Hmm.
moment, right? And as you're saying, yes, I totally agree with what you just said about so and so issue. Here's what I think about it. And in that little bit of time, you would have given your brain a little bit of a
Yes.
wedge in the door to
Yes.
articulate something. So play around with that idea. You may not have to be the first. You may be the yes and person. You may be the third person. You may be the person that someone has to come in and say, like Steve says, hey, I was just talking to Steve. He has something really interesting I think might add to this conversation. And look for the advocacy. So I love the diversity of points of entry here.
Hmm.
Yeah. And now I'm going to talk about the flip side of this.
Oh,
Because as you guys were talking, I'm like, oh yeah, well, I remember about a time when that happened, and it doesn't fit here. So, like for example, I'm in a meeting or I'm in a conversation, and I'm trying to get uh, uh, but everybody, because I feel like the American culture, people just dive in, and
hmm.
from South Africa, we don't do that. We're very courteous. We want to wait until there's a space. That didn't happen here. After a while, I'm like, okay, I give up. And then fast forward to today. If I feel there's only noise in the conversation, no need to add to that. Just
Hmm.
back off and sit, because
Mhm.
then you're taking your space.
So I
So,
have an interesting lens on that. There was a project that I worked on where there were teams that were composed of different nationalities, different cultural backgrounds, different leadership styles, different communication styles. And one of the teams was having a heck of a time communicating. Lots of conflict, misunderstanding, unspoken tensions, all kinds of things. And I was reading a book called The Culture Map. And I thought, wow, I think that might be something that's happening here. So I asked them in one of our conversations, who feels the least heard in this room, in this team? And it was the Asian members of the team. And they voiced that they felt like agreement was reached without their input
mm,
because culturally they tended to not necessarily disagree openly. They like to process things and speak in private and speak in more closed conversations versus having the open debate.
mm,
And when the other teammates who were Westerners, English, Irish, blah, 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 realized how their cultural differences had been shutting out the other members of the team, it changed the whole dynamic of the conversations. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, they became a high performing team in that program
Yeah.
because they learned how to communicate more effectively
Mm,
with each other
yeah.
and invite each other to the conversation
Yeah.
versus trying to stake their claim in the conversation,
Mhm.
which is a very Western thing, as you just laid
Yeah.
out, Doc.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I know Indian people, and I'm, Indian, do not speak up.
Mm,
You get the one or two, but just a few that do speak up, that's bold enough. But a lot of Indian people just go with the flow
mhm,
because we don't want to cause any, ripples here and just we can't, not even a ripple. Forget about waves and
mhm,
storms. We don't want to even cause a ripple. We just want everything to go smoothly. So the tendency to not rock the boat is there. Let's comply. Let's follow the rules. Let's be the good thing and let's not get picked on. So, that I know that recently I also read that book. So,
And see,
uh,
this is the role of diversity, equity, and inclusion,
yeah,
right? It's
yes.
right. So the misappropriation of the concept is flawed
Hmm.
at the very least. But when you think about what it means to include people,
Hmm.
to make sure their voice is heard, so you get the value of their point of view and their experience and
Hmm.
expertise,
Yeah,
is so much richer.
yeah.
And so when our culture forces other cultures to shrink because their cultural behaviors don't align with ours,
Hmm.
we're missing out on the richness of what they have to offer.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of inclusion, is that we're drawing from all of the richness around us, not just what we expect and how we want to see it.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I can speak to the white dudes who might be
Okay.
out there in the audience. Because I'm a white dude, uh, grew up in the Midwest, got good grades, and if you ask my mom, she would tell you I never said anything wrong or did anything stupid. I'm a perfect angel. And often in my spaces, right, if I speak and I learn how to speak first and I'm clever, I might get rewards for that. And I might take that as positive reinforcement that I should do more and more and more of that. Balloons can pop. We didn't mention that if you blow the balloon so hot, so with so much air, it can pop. So the thing that I had to learn is that maybe not everything, every thought that crossed my mind, and there are a lot of them, needs to be said. And
Mm,
I learned it, if I can share it quickly, the story, in a really important way, in a sacred place for me. I was in ORSC training, that's team coaching, organizational relationship systems training. And someone in that training was having a real epiphany, and it was around race relations. It was around discrimination she had faced her whole life and was just at that moment seeing it. And now me, I like to be a nice ally, and I read all the books, and I learned so much from actually both of you on this call and so many others about how I could be better, that I just couldn't wait to share, all these observations that I had. And it was totally the wrong moment. She was trying to process this lifelong trauma. And I was like, oh, I know what you're talking about, like looking for points, because that's
mm,
how I was programmed my whole life.
mm,
And the instructor, the coach, the masterful coach, he told me in the break on the way to lunch, he's like, Steve, you weren't wrong what you were saying. That was good, important stuff, but it was the wrong moment.
mm,
That was not the right time. And he said, what I want you to work on is what I call shot selection,
Mm,
right? If you're playing golf, you can hit the driver every time, And Chloe, I know you love playing golf. It's so much better when you can sit back. If everyone's talking and there's too much going on in some big American or Western Europe conversation, just sit back and watch. Listen to through the lens of your values, your purpose, and for the moment, then you'll see the thing that really does need to be addressed, and
mm.
then you can speak. So
Yeah.
that was a big change for me that took painfully probably too long to learn.
Mm. Words matter, huh?
Mm.
mhm.
Words matter. Every word counts. And how it lands, what we say, how we say it, our tone, facial expression, when we say it, who we're saying it to, how much we're saying, how less we're saying, whether we're telling, whether we're asking. Oh my gosh. Every response can make or break someone or help them unshrink. Help them
Word,
to get that first breath to blow into the balloon.
Mhm.
Steve?
as you're speaking, it's like words are the currency of humanity.
Mm.
My daughter Lana, who's 11, she said, "Hey, Dad, a book is just a remix of the dictionary." And I was like, "That's pretty cool." I'm sure you got it on TikTok or
That's
something.
good. That's good. It needs
And
a
I
beat.
was, and I told her, you know what? I told her, well, the dictionary is just a remix of the alphabet, and she was like, uh, "But it is true what you say. Words matter. Words are somehow all we have." And at a school tour that I took for my daughter's new schools coming up next year, one of the teachers had the word yet, huge 3 letters, YET, on the back of the wall in big, bold yellow letters. Yet. And I just, that stuck with me. I mentioned it to the teacher. I'm like, that is such a powerful
Yes.
word, especially for a place of learning, because I can't do this yet. I don't understand that yet. I'm not 6 foot tall yet, whatever it is.
It's such a powerful word.
Yeah,
Such a powerful
that's
word.
cool.
It means your journey has not ended. This is not the end. You're
It's so,
here yet.
You're not
so
done yet.
Yeah.
there's an expansion hack for you. 3 little letters, YET.
Yes. Yes. So let's go on to our next question. What is one personal ritual or mindset shift that helps you take up space without apology?
Mm. One of the things that I've been practicing lately is envisioning my future self.
Mhm.
When I think about this question, um, the hack for me is like before I make a decision, before a big moment, before I get on the podcast, uh, the question is, who am I being loyal to? My
Mm.
fear or my future?
Mm.
Mm.
Am I shrinking to my fear, or am I enlarging, expanding to the future self that I envision?
Yeah.
That's always that's pointing to that yet, the
Yeah.
person that I am not yet, and as opposed to the person that I'm very familiar with. And whenever I shrink, it's going back to this familiarity and comfort.
Mm.
But if I'm going towards my future with my thinking, I can't shrink. It's going to be an expansion. So that's the hack that I look at.
You just said something now that I just want to grab on. You said shrinking, you almost said it without saying it. Shrinking is comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Oh
Oof.
yeah.
Hmm.
Even thinking about that, it kind of irks me. Shrinking is comfortable, and I'm happy to be. I'm comfortable shrunk.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm comfortable being a shrunk person. That is so, right there. It's powerful enough to want to say, I need a ritual or a mindset shift, so I'm not being in that place.
Mm.
Well, it's like the parable of the boat in the harbor. The ship is safest in the harbor, but the ship was never meant to stay in the harbor. For the ship to expand, it doesn't mean the ship gets bigger. It means the ship does what it's supposed to do.
Yes.
You know, and
Yeah.
the ship going out on the ocean is risky, but that's what it's supposed
Mm.
to do. It's built to do that, and so the safety is not the point. The
Yeah.
the ocean is the point.
Oh my gosh. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I
and these
love that. It's comfort versus risk, because we can stay in the shrink and be comfortable, or we can explore and expand, and that is risky. It takes risk, it takes courage, it takes boldness.
well, and we haven't talked about one thing that keeps us small it's a coaching term, saboteurs. these voices in our head who tell us, no, don't do that, don't do this, you're doing it wrong, it's not your time. All of these saboteur voices, they're trying to keep us safe.
Yeah.
Don't raise your hand in the meeting and make that controversial point. Don't say yes to that, leading that training course or to that business opportunity or studying abroad or whatever it is. Don't say that. It's way too risky, way too dangerous. And that really keeps us small. So my hack of one small thing that I started to do to stop keeping myself small is saying yes. So it's not Y-E-T, it's Y-E-S this time. And in particular, what an agreement I made with myself 15 years ago was if somebody wanted to talk about coaching, the answer was yes. And I can tell you why. I was at a leadership program. I was learning how to do it. It was in Utah, and we were snowshoeing. And I was talking to everyone in my group about coaching. I was asking them coaching questions. And one of the people pulled me aside and said, Steve, stop coaching. Like, not everything is about that. You can be something else. Like, we're tired of it, And so that wasn't the group that wanted to talk about as much as I did. So when people showed up, when I was sent people in my life that said, hey, what is this coaching about? Or I want to explore that with you. The answer was yes. It's why I'm on this podcast now. It's why I have all these relationships and people across the globe. And that has been such a huge, expansive change in my life, because I said yes to conversations that are the ones that I wanted to have. I almost couldn't not have them.
Yeah. Wow. So thank you for sharing that. And I know this is not a question that I kind of said I'm going to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is one word of not just advice, but motivation? One motivating word that you can put out there to someone who is in a shrunk place right now, and they want to expand, and they said, help me, coaches, help me. How do I get this started?
I mean, the word that came to me is 2 words, but you could say them fast and it would sound like one. Why not? Whatever you're worried about, whatever you feels uncomfortable, you don't feel like doing it, you could ask yourself, why not? It's like the 5 whys. You might have heard of that. Try the 5 why nots. And I think you will uncover the viruses in your program, the saboteurs, whatever we want to call them. You're going to discover that it's fear. You're voting for fear instead of your future. And you might uncover some real stuff from your past that you might need some help with. And there are people who can help you overcome that. So why not?
Yeah. So the 5 why nots. AJ?
I would, my word's a little bit smaller. It's do.
Do.
If
That
you
water on the grass?
2 letters, D-O.
Oh, okay.
Do.
Do.
It makes more sense.
Because if you're doing something, you're inevitably going to be taking a risk. Even if you do nothing, you're safe. If you sit back and watch, you're safe. If you're silent, you're safe. Maybe it could be a false safety. But if you simply do what you know to do what comes to your heart, do what comes to your lips, say it. Say the thing, do the thing, build the thing, make the thing, do it. That is going to show you something about yourself that you never knew before. When you do something, you are pushing yourself outside of that initial boundary. And so the moment you do, you're in a new space. You're in unfamiliar territory. You have to learn something. It's inevitable that you're going to grow because you do. That's the word to me.
Yeah. Okay. So here we have it. The 5 why nots and do. So, KJ, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom as usual. Steve, your wisdom, all your little phrases that you put together that comes together magically, and KJ with all your illustrations just beautifully just come together. Thank you so much for making this conversation so real.
Can
So
we
for
say
all,
thank you, Chloe, for making this space, inviting us back time and time again? I mean, you don't know how much fun this is
Yeah.
and how meaningful it is. So thank you.
you're coming back. This is not goodbye.
Yeah, but it's a good habit. Thank
This
you.
is not
Thank
the end. But coming back, I got something else happening. There's something going on there. It's
Yeah, I
brewing.
already manifested at least episode 49.
There you
Yeah.
go. There you go.
Check the
Yes.
tape.
Hmm.
Okay, so everybody, this week, choose one way to expand, whether it's raising your hand, lifting your posture, or just like simply walking into a room like you belong. Because you do, and why not? Because you do, and why not? So the journey from shrinking to expansion isn't about being loud, it's about being whole, and you are here to rise, not to shrink, to rise. You are here to take your space. Take your space. Okay, so everybody, take care, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.